After this, the eldest son of Hur, Horus, was raised from the dignity of a guardian to be the crown prince of the land, and as it is established, then had this glorious entity, Hur of Alabastronopolis, the desire in his heart to place his son upon the throne forevermore, and Yemen gave command that they should conduct the entity Hur with a joyful mind to Thebes, the eternal city, and his son on his breast, apt to bring him in with festivity before Yemen, to deliver to him his royal office and to establish it for the term of his life. Then they arrived full of joy during his splendid festival in Ept of the south country, and they beheld this entity Hur, the lord of Alabastronopolis, in company with his son, in the coronation procession, that he might bestow upon him his office and his throne. Then was Yemen Ra moved with joy, and he beheld the king's daughter, and wished to unite her to him. And behold, he brought her to this prince, the crown prince, Hur Yimhub. Then and he went into the palace, and he placed him before himself on the exalted place on the throne of his glorious distinguished daughter. And she bowed herself and embraced his pleasing form, and placed herself before him, and all the entities of the chamber of fire were full of ecstasy at his coronation. Nekab, or is it Nexab? Buto, Nit, Ast. I just learned. I forgot how to say Nephthys again. Hur set the whole circle of the entities on the exalted place raised their song of praise to the height of heaven, and there was joy because of the grace of Yemen. After this, there was an interval of rest. Then went Yemen with his son before him to the hall of the kings to set his royal helmet on his head and to lengthen his term of life, as it should in fact be. Then the entities cried out, "We are assembled. We will to invest him with his kingdom. We will to bestow upon him the royal tire of the sun entity Ra. We will to praise Yemen in him. Thou hast brought him to us to protect us. Give him the 30 years' festivals of the sun entity Ra, and the days of Hur as king. Let him be one who does that which is pleasing to thy heart and Ept, just as on Heliopolis, and in Memphis. Is it Aun? Is that how you say Heliopolis? I don't know how to say Memphis either. Let it be he who glorifies these places, and the great name of this divine one was settled, and his title recorded, responding to the holiness of the sun entity as follows. 1. As Hur, the powerful bull, always at hand with counsel. 2. As the Lord of the double crown, great from his wonderful works and apt. 3. As golden Hur, who rests himself on justice, the upholder of the land. 4. As king, how do you say that? Sir. Oh, I don't remember. King Sir Xpro Ra. Who was elected by the sun entity. Okay, here we are. We have Ra Thurxpru Snoopen. Okay, he was elected by the sun entity. As the son of Ra, Bur Yemen Horiumheb. May he live forever. Then came forth from the palace. The Arabs also had this idea of you have 5 names. I mean, if you're particularly important, that is, the society. May he live forever. Then came forth from the palace of the majesty of this glorious entity, Yemen, the king of the entities, with his son before him, and he embraced his pleasing form, which was crowned with the royal helmet, in order to deliver him from the golden protecting image of the sun's disk. The 9 foreign nations were under his feet. The heaven was in a most festive disposition. The land was filled with ecstasy, and as for the entities of Egypt, their souls were full of pleasant feelings. Then the inhabitants, in high delight, raised towards heaven the song of praise. Great and small lifted up their voices, and the whole land was moved with joy. After this festival in Apt, the southern country was finished. Then Yemen, the king of the entities, went in peace to Thebes, and the king went down the river on board his ship like an image of Horyamku. Horyamheb. Okay, that's right pronunciation, I guess. Thus had he taken possession of the land, and was the custom since the time of the sun entity Ra. Remember, there was a mythical age where the gods ruled, and then it was servants of gods, and well, I mean, they called them, they treated them as gods, but anyways, he renewed the dwellings of entities from the shallows of the marshland of Nathu as far as Nubia. He had all their images sculptured, each as it had been before, more than. And the sun entity Ra rejoiced when he beheld that renewed which had been destroyed in former times. He set them up in their temple, and he had 100 images made, one of each of them of like form, and of all kinds of costly stones. He visited the cities of the entities which lay as heaps of rubbish in this land, and he had them restored just as they had been from the beginning of all things. He took care for their daily festival a sacrifice, and for all the vessels of their temples formed out of gold and silver. He provided them, the temples, with holy persons and singers, and with the best bodyguards, and he presented to them arable land and cattle, and supplied them with all kinds of provisions which they required to sing. Thus, each new morning to the sun entity Ra, thou hast made the kingdom great for us in thy Son, who is the consolation of thy soul, King Horyamheb. Grant him continuance of the 30 years' feasts. Give him the victory over all countries, as to her, the son of Yust, saw, towards whom, in like manner, thy heart yearned on the company of thy circle of entities. It is noticeable that the late King A is passed over in silence. The passage is also obscure, in which mention is made of the daughter, in all probability his harassed daughter, who had taken refuge in the temple of Yemen. Thus it was possibly Nut Mut afterwards, the king's wife, whose dependence on the supposed godhead of Yemen, the priest wished to reward by a marriage with Horyamheb. After the newly elected king had ascended the vacant throne with a grand ceremonial at Thebes, where, as the inscription informs us, he was crowned, his first work was the enlargement and beautifying of this temple. To this end, a gigantic obelisk at Karnak, raised by Yatanux Ra Kun, was destroyed, and the blocks of stone were broken up and used for the building of the 4th gate tower of the great temple of Yemen and Apt. A 2nd gate tower was added, both being connected by walls with a large court, and in front of the outermost gate an avenue of sphinxes was set up in honor of Yemen, the name of Horyamheb. And thus speaks Yemen Ra, the king of entities. Splendid is the monument which thou hast erected for me. O Her, thou wisest king, my heart rejoices in thy love. I am enchanted with the sight of thy memorial, and therefore we grant thee a life as long as the sun and the years of Her as king of the land. Now, Her as a deity name is kind of like persona of God. The entrances to this gate were also adorned with statues of the king, The eastern side walls were also sculptured with representations of the princes of Punt, who appear before the king, to whom they present a number of heavy sacks filled with gold, saying, "Hail to thee, King of Egypt, son of the 9 foreign nations! By thy name we did not know Egypt, our fathers never trod it. Present us with freedom out of thy hand. We will be thy subjects." Horemheb undertook a victorious expedition against the Sudan, as may be seen at Silsilis. The bas-reliefs are best described by Champollion. The pharaoh is represented as standing, as with his battle axe on his shoulder, he receives from Yemen-Ra the emblem of divine life and power to subdue the north and conquer the south. Beneath lie Ethiopians, some prostrate on the ground, others stretching forth their hands in prayer to an Egyptian leader who, according to the inscription, upbraids them with having shut their hearts to wisdom and with refusing to hear when it was said to them, "Behold the lion who has fallen upon the land of Cush." The king is carried on a throne by his generals, accompanied by the fan bearers. Servants clear the road by which the procession is to pass. Behind him appear warriors who lead with them hostile generals as prisoners. Other armed men with shields on their shoulders put themselves in motion with the trumpeters at their head. A troop of Egyptian officers, priests, and other officials receive the king and do homage to him. The hieroglyphs run as follows: "The divine benefactor returns home after he has subdued the princes of all countries." Catholic Europe and Christian titles have referred to anybody kind of, "Oh, he's doing the work of God, he's a divine," same language. "His bow is in his hand as if he were," the god of war, too, "the lord of Thebes, the powerful, glorious king, leads the princes of the miserable land of Cush with him. The king comes back from Ethiopia with the booty which he has taken by force," the spoils of war. "And his father Yemen hath commended him." In the tomb of the official at Gurna is a vivid representation of the arrival of the spoils of war from Sudan. The inscription above it says in short and pithy terms, "Reception of the silver, gold, ivory, and ebony into the treasure house." But Horemheb was not only mindful of Yemen, Ptah also received his full share. An inscription found in Thebes says, "In the first year in the month Koyak, on the 22nd day of King Horemheb, the day of the feast of the Memphite Ptah in Thebes, on his festival, the sacrifices were appointed for this entity according to the command of the king." That Horemheb knew how to reward his followers is testified by the grave of his faithful servant, the priest Neferhotep, in the necropolis of Thebes. "In the 3rd year under the reign of the king of Egypt, Horemheb, his majesty showed himself comparable to the sun entity Ra in his own sepulchre for the purpose of making an offering of bread to his father Yemen. As he came out from the golden chamber, cries of joy sounded through the whole region, and the shout rose up heavenward. Then was the holy father of Yemen, Neferhotep, summoned to receive the king's thousandfold gracious rewards and all manner of presents consisting of silver and gold, stuffs, fine oils, bread and drinks, flesh and condiments, according to the command of his Lord Yemen." Well, and his, I would put in the parentheses, but Yemen, "the rewards were presented to me," and him, "in the most exalted presence by the chief singer of Yemen, Hattab-yeb." Pleasing to the heart, I think, is what they're trying to say. Neferhotep speaks thus: "One rich and makes acknowledgments by presence, so is the entity, the king of the entities, who acknowledges him that acknowledges him, and rewards him that works for him, and protects him that serves him." What further can be known of Hor-Yim-Hub is only from the ruins of contemporaneous monuments, among which is a very remarkable fragment in the British collection, which runs thus: "In the 7th year of King Hor-Yim-Hub, that was the day of the conveying the people of A, my father, to the abodes of the dead, the burgomaster of the city," that's Thebes, Jahotatamas, had assigned the burial places which are situated at the necropolis, which belongs to the territory of Pharaoh, and he granted the tomb of Yemen to A, my father, for appropriation. It was namely on my mother, his daughter by birth, and he left behind no male child. All his burial places would therefore have remained deserted afterwards. In the 21st year, on the first day of the month Pa'one, they stood before Yemen-Hatep, and I spake to him, "Grant, I pray thee, to each one the burial places of their fathers." Then he gave me the burial places of A by a writing, so I came into their full possession. However insignificant the formless piece of limestone may be, still it is valuable on account of its historical testimony that Hor-Yim-Hub lived to see the 21st year of his reign. And